Now that you have completed your self-assessments, it's time to gather your staff for the consensus meeting. The consensus meeting should include all of the staff who were assessed, all of the staff who did the assessing, any other pertinent program or club staff. In this meeting, your goal is to understand what a consensus meeting is, why we are using that process, come to a shared understanding of all of the various YPQ items, and then agree upon scores for those items based on the self-assessments. Allowing for this instead of just allowing the self-assessors to score is going to give all of your staff an opportunity to voice their opinions about the score. And so before that is entered in, there will be some agreement upon that score. This is going to help with buy-in and commitment to any improvement plans that we come up with based upon these scores. So in order to get to these objectives, the agenda for this meeting is we're going to do some community building with an activity called Lost at Sea that I will walk through. We'll explain why and how we're going to do this. Folks like to know what they are doing and why they are doing it. You'll go through some group agreements and then review each of the YPQA items. Lost at Sea is an interactive exercise that flexes the consensus and agreement muscle. What you're going to do is look at the following chart and pair up and make decisions about which items are the most important. This allows your group to work on consensus together, coming to agreement together about something that is super low stakes. That way, when they move into something like a score, they're already going to have had an opportunity to see what it was like discussing something to come to an agreement. Consensus and agreement does not mean that everyone wins. It means that we all compromise on something that is agreeable for all of us. If we are able to do that, if I, as a frontline staff who has a score of 3, was able to discuss why I got that score of 3, I am much more likely to follow through with the improvement plan that we come up with based upon that score. So this activity just gives you a way to allow your staff to have a little bit of fun together and also practice what it means, what it looks like to come to agreement with this group that you've put together. Now that you've finished that, you're going to go through the what, why, and how of consensus. So a consensus meeting is a way of decision making that helps groups reach agreements through a creative and dynamic process. It's a respectful dialogue between parties that helps you consider the skills, experience, and expertise of everyone in a room in an equal way so that everyone's voice is considered valuable to the conversation. This is key when you have different levels of hierarchy and power within this group. So you likely will have frontline staff and club directors talking about the performance potentially of some of those frontline staff. You're going to want to do this in a way that's extremely respectful and lets your staff know that their skills and experience and expertise are equally valuable to this conversation and will be considered when making this decision. This consensus meeting is a process that doesn't just lead to consensus on a particular score. It helps guide us to consensus on our understanding of each item on the PQ. If we have a different understanding of what an item looks like, so for instance, there is an item that asks about concrete versus abstract learning. If 2 of our staff have a different understanding of what that looks like, then we are going to come up with a different score and a different improvement plan every time. This also creates opportunities for all staff to be a part of the process, which deepens their level of commitment. So if you aren't a staff that was assessed or got to assess, you get to be part of the consensus process so that you are part of the improvement process and the improvement planning process. Again, that's just going to deepen the level of commitment for all of our staff. This is also actually a process that's something that your organization can use for a variety of scenarios. Anytime that you need to problem solve or do strategic planning and you need to get a group to agree on anything really, agree on the next steps for a plan, agree on the way to solve a particular problem. This type of consensus meeting can be used for anything where there needs to be consensus. The consensus process is that every single item in the PQ has a slide in this deck. We're going to present the item slide. The assessor will have the ability to share their score and evidence. Everyone will show either a thumbs up or thumbs down to indicate whether they agree. If anyone shows a thumbs down, allow them 1 minute to explain their thoughts with no interruption. Now you will present the next slide, which I will show you this in 1 second, and that gives you information from the Program Quality Assessment Handbook and some examples of what that item looks like. Group will now have 2 minutes to discuss the item further with the information from the person or people who disagreed, as well as the examples from the PQA handbook. And then you will repeat step 3. Before we start this process, though, we want to come to some group agreements about how we want to be towards each other during this meeting, because there are going to be sensitive topics that are discussed. The group agreement process is fully detailed in the agenda that is available for download on the CQI toolkit. Now we're going to go into the item review as described in the consensus process slide. What I mentioned is that every item is going to have its own slide, as you see here. So if everyone agrees, if we have decided that this one, if the assessor says that this was a score of 5 and they gave their evidence as to why, everyone went around and was a thumbs up, you're just going to move directly to the next item. That means that you're going to skip over this slide right here. Every item slide has a follow-up slide that has examples as mentioned from the PQA handbook. So if you agree here, you just skip over this and move on to that item number 2. However, if there are a thumbs down, let's say that the assessor scored a 5 and somebody disagrees, and then they say that it should be a 3 and they provide evidence for why that is a 3. The next thing that you're going to want to do is go over this slide. You're going to show examples of really dig a little bit deeper into what this item means. What are we talking about when we say positive emotional climate? You'll see that there's a further description of what that looks like, as well as a couple of scenarios. You're going to share this with the group, and then you're going to do the consensus process again. So you're going to ask for those, you're going to do 2 minutes of discussion with the new information from the person who said this was a 3 and the information that we learned on this slide here. Once you've allowed for 2 minutes of discussion, you are going to repeat step 3, which was the thumbs up, thumb down process. You will do that until you can get to consensus on a score and move to the next item. Once you have it, you move to the next item and repeat the consensus process. This is a very large deck because it has every single item. So when you download it and it says that it is 100 or so slides, please do not get daunted if most of these will be quick. So for this instance, the program space is clean and sanitary. Likelihood is the evidence is going to be that it was a 5. There was no cleanliness issues observed. Everyone is going to agree. You're going to move past that slide right onto the next item. This is how you will complete the rest of the consensus process. This meeting does take about 3 hours, and it really should be given that much time. If you have any questions about the consensus meeting or any other part of the CQI process, you can always email quality@bgca.org.